recording this webinar. Yeah, just for you to know. So today's webinar is about the LCA collaboration server. Let me share the presentation with you. Right, so the LCA collaboration server was developed by Green Delta under support from the United States Department of Agriculture. And it's quite a new application. It's definitely new for openLCA, but I think it's something that is actually more or less unprecedented for all LCA softwares. And we think this webinar will help you all to get started basically with the LCA collaboration server and to learn how it can support the work of your working group. So what we like to do with you today is to give you a brief introduction to the LCA collaboration server. Afterwards, we will have a short live demonstration. We will also discuss use cases with you. We will then finish the presentation with some concluding remarks, and we hope we have some time to gather some feedback from you and also discuss with you the opportunities of the LCA collaboration server for your working group. Maybe before we get started, we always advertise the collaboration server as an application to perform LCA studies in distributed teams. So it might be worth to just quickly look at what we actually consider a distributed team is. And basically the term refers to a group of individuals who work together from different geographic locations and who rely on communication technology to work together or to get their work done together. Different geographic locations might sound a bit far-fetched in the first place, so you can either consider distributed teams even on different continents, but even if you work within the same office, you can also call yourself a distributed team if you work from different workstations on a project, let's say on an LCA project, for instance. So a short introduction to the collaboration server. It's a server application that complements openLCA, so you can install it not on your desktop computer, but you can install it on, basically on a server. And what it does is that it facilitates the exchange of LCA datasets between users who work in a distributed team, so from different computers. So this is quite interesting, I think, for basically everyone who works collaborative on an LCA study. And nowadays, with the advancement of LCA, of course, this is also becoming increasingly common. So basically what this application does is that it helps you to work together with your team, even though if you work from different locations or from different computers. So what it does is that it basically synchronizes your databases in openLCA, and it also helps you to track changes in your LCA study and also to compare data sets. That is also something that we will show during the live demonstration. And basically with these features, the LCA collaboration server empowers users to conduct distributed and also simultaneous collaborative LCA modeling. That is something that can already be done today, also under use of openLCA, but the LCA collaboration server definitely helps you in the process, and we will show you during the webinar how it facilitates your work. Maybe just to get started, we would like to clarify a few key terms which we will use during the webinar, just in order to make sure that you understand what we are demonstrating. So the first two important key terms would be the local database and the online repository. So basically everyone who has experience in working with openLCA will be familiar with the term database. So local database in openLCA, it's basically a group data set, so projects, product systems, processes, flows, indicators and parameters, but also the background data. So all the data that you have in your local database in openLCA. And the online repository, it's basically the equivalent to a database in openLCA on the LCA collaboration server. So it can also contain group data sets such as projects, product systems, and so on. And the aim of this online repository is basically to mirror your local openLCA database, on not only necessarily of one user, but of course also for several users. And with this, help to exchange LCA data and to work on LCA projects together. Other key terms which we would like to discuss is, for instance, a commit and also a fetch. Maybe some of you are already familiar with these terms. A commit generally refers to contributing a package of data sets from a user's local database. So basically from the database in openLCA to the online repository. So it's basically sending your work to the LCA collaboration server. And on the other hand, you can also conduct a fetch, which means that you are updating your local database in openLCA with changes that other users, or maybe also you yourself, contributed to the repository on the LCA collaboration server. That is also something which we will show, of course, during the live demonstration. So if this is not very clear right now, we are sure it will become clear in a bit. Also regarding the LCA collaboration server, we would like to, or maybe to briefly explain the structure of the LCA collaboration server is that one server can host different groups. So you can think of a group as, let's say, just a working group which has or hosts several repositories. So you can assign specific databases or repositories to a group, and you can also assign users or teams to specific groups or repositories, which can then access the LCA data. So, and the team is basically just an aggregation of users. And of course, that's also something which we'll show during the live demonstration, with which we can start now. For this, I will now share the screen of my colleague Sebastian, who's here with me today. He is the lead developer of the LCA collaboration server. Let me first share the screen. Wait.
That's good. I think it's already.
Okay, right. So now you should see Sebastian's screen, and we'll start with the live demonstration.
So I have a small sheet here, so this will guide me through the demonstration. So first time I will have to create a repository in the collaboration server. For this I navigate. So before this we have set up a server where the collaboration server is already installed, and we are already using this with some customers already. So this is publicly available. And first I'll log in with my user account. Okay, so this is the landing page of the collaboration server. I can see all the repositories that I have access to. For this demo, I create a group. So I call this group demonstration. And okay, so in this group now, I'm the only member, so I'm the only person having access to this group, which does not contain anything yet. So next step would be to create a repository. This is similar to creating a new database in openLCA. So I do this, and I call it webinar. Okay, so now I have this repository. It's still empty, which is identified by the group and the repository name. So this is demonstration/webinar. It's basically the ID of the repository. Okay, so the next step. I'm going to openLCA. I'm starting it here. This is the current version 1.7.2, which is available on the openLCA website. And I have prepared a simple database here called demo. I'm going to just open it. So this is the normal openLCA interface. And okay.
Well, maybe in the meantime, I think during today's webinar, also because we have to download and upload data in between, Maybe we will have a break of 1 or 2 minutes in between. So if you want, you can also ask some questions in the chat window. And if we have time, we can already try to answer some of these questions when we have a short break to fetch or commit data.
So now I'm open the database, just a normal way in openLCA. And first of all, I will have to enable the repository feature, since not every user, most of the users will probably not use it from the start. So first you navigate to the preferences, to the collaboration tab, and then you have to enable this feature here and register a connection to the server. So I can right-click, create a new connection. I have to specify the URL, the same as the web URL. My user credentials. And I mark this as default. Okay, so now I have a new entry in the context menu onto database, and I can connect to an existing repository, the one that, for example, the one that I just created. If I have several different servers, I can select here, but I only just created this one connection. And now I have to put the path here, which was a demonstration / webinar. Okay, so now it's connecting. In this way, it's just checking that everything, that it has a valid connection and the credentials are also valid. Now it's building a local index of the database. It's more technical stuff in the background. First thing you can notice is that there are now arrows or chevrons indicating that there are changes in this local database that are not yet committed or uploaded to the repository. So everything is marked as basically new. So you can see with the plus, indicated by the plus sign on each item. And so the first thing I'll do is to commit this initial database to the repository. So everybody who will want to work with this data set is able to fetch it into their local openLCA instance. So in the background, it will now collect all the information from the local database and present to me a list, so I can check which elements I want to commit or not. For the first time, when you're initially committing a database, this takes some time, not too much, I hope. It should be just like 10-20 seconds. Depending on the size of the database, this can take some time. Afterwards, you will see that it's going to be much faster when you just have changed like several data sets and want to commit those. So now I will have to put a message that describes what I'm committing. So in this case, it's just the initial, say, check-in into the database, into the repository. So. And then I hit commit, and what happens now is that openLCA on the fly exports and directly uploads the changes to the collaboration server, indicated by this progress monitor. And after this, the data will be available on the server. I don't think we need to skip, because I think it's going fast enough. Mm-hmm. Okay. Local index will now be updated, which you will see after this. All the plus signs and the chevron signs will be gone, since there's now they are like in sync with the repository. So. Yes, so now it's the same as before I was connecting to the repository. If I now go back to the website, and I can now go to the data sets here and then see all the data sets available. I will show this in more detail later. For now, I will add Jonas to the members of this repository so that he can also access and add data. Right now, if you would try to connect to the repository, you would get a warning that he does not have access to this repository. So first I will need to add him. Jonas. And I will put, there's different roles. Maybe a short introduction to this is, so there's a reader role that will basically just be able to view and download or fetch the data sets, but don't contribute anything. Then there's a contributor who can, as the name says, contribute data or commit data to the repository. And then there's two specific roles. One is the reviewer. Reviewers can make comments on data sets within the web application. And editors can approve these comments if relevant, and also manage tasks. We will show the tasks feature at the end of this demonstration. Yeah. And finally, there's the owner, which the creator of the repository is also always the owner, and he can delete the repository and also add new members to it. What I'm doing right now. And these roles are built hierarchical, so each role has all the rights that the previous roles have had. Okay, so I'm going to add the reviewer role for Jonas. Okay, now as you can see, we are both part of the repository. And now we can switch back to your screen.
So I will reclaim presenter status now. Okay, well, so this is my openLCA, just as Sebastian did. I also added my user credentials. I also enabled the collaboration feature. So what I'm going to do now is to create a new empty database. I will call it LCA test, LCA CS test. So this database is now completely empty. I will connect it to the repository that Sebastian created. So demonstration is the name of the group, and then /webinar. Webinar is the name of the repository. I can then right-click and select from the repository options the option fetch or the feature fetch. I can see that Sebastian Greve committed data with the message initial check-in to the repository. So this is what I will fetch now. So basically what I'm doing now is to download all the data from the online repository into my local database. This is a list of the differences. So everything is different basically because my database with which I started was completely empty. So of course this can take a couple of minutes depending on the size of your database. Of course for this webinar we selected a rather small database and the download should be done in less than a minute. Disconnected schon, ne? So this is the final step of the fetch. And as you can now see, my database is no longer empty. but all the data that Sebastian contributed to the online repository is now in my database. Right, so I will make Sebastian the presenter again, and then we will show you how, how you can apply small changes to data sets in your repository.
Next. So next, I'm going to show you the browsing feature of the collaboration server. As I showed before, you have an overview of all the different groups or dataset categories that you have in openLCA as well. And I can navigate through this like through the tree in openLCA. So let's go to the air transportation category. I can always see what was the last change and when did it happen. I see how many data sets are in this category. And then these three, I can now navigate here. And then you can see basically the openLCA, the information of the LCA dataset. As you could see in any other LCA software as well. You cannot edit this here, it's just a view mode, there's nothing to edit here. So we have the different documentation here, the actors and sources that were added, some meta information on the right. And from each of these, so all the elements that are openLCA models can be navigated. So I can go to the, for example, to the carbon dioxide flow, and then here I have the flow properties of this flow. So this is mass. I can navigate there, and so on. So you can browse through the whole database basically. Also, there's on the left the menu entry commits. The commits, well, right now it's just one commit. Maybe we can show later when we did some additional commits here. You have more or less the history of changes. And if you click on the details, you can see which data sets were added. In this case, it's a bit tedious because there's, I guess, how many pages? Like 23,800 data sets because it was the initial check-in. This is more helpful if it's a small commit like later. Okay, so next steps, I will go back to openLCA and create a new product system. So therefore, I'll choose the transport aircraft freight process, create a product system format, make automatic linking of this product system then. So the model looks like this. I will expand it. So this is this quite small product system that we have. It's good for the demonstration purpose, I think. And yeah, so I just created this, and now I want to share this with Jonas as well, so he can maybe start a calculation, do some changes to it. So again, I have to. This is just in my local database now, so I see that there's a change in the product systems, and there's the new product system here. So I'm going to commit this. Now it will check if there's already changes done. So, but right now there's no external changes. I only have this local change indicated. There's a plus sign again that it will be uploaded to as a new data set to the collaboration server. Okay, so now I commit this. Okay, which was of course much faster. And if I'm not wrong. So if I go to the data sets now, there's two product systems here, and this is the transport aircraft freight I just created. You can see a few seconds ago it was updated, and it looks like this. Right now there's no calculation results. We have the supply chain, so you can see what are the connections with the processes, and then go here and take a closer look, and so on. We have a small feature called graph, but it's in the beta stadium, so that's not really too much of help. It tries to visualize in a different way, but for now, this is only a beta feature. We will try to extend this later. Okay, so now I'll give back I'll stop sharing, and Jonas will take over again. And we'll fetch the changes I just did, do some other changes, and yeah.
Also, welcome back to my computer. As you can see, the product system that Sebastian created is not yet in my database. So I fetched the newest changes from the repository. I can see that just 1 minute ago, Sebastian created a new commit, which I will now fetch. And I can also see the differences of the repository compared to my database. So the only difference now is that this product system transport aircraft freight has been added. And now it's also in my database. So what I can do now, for instance, is to apply some changes. I can also calculate the quick results, for instance, of this product system. I can change the general information of the product system. And I can also apply some changes, for instance, to processes in the database. So I will now select the process code generation, and I can, for instance, change the start date and also the end date. I can also check out the input-output table, and I will change, for instance, the amount of crude oil that is being used in the product system, and maybe also the general description of this process. Right, so I will now commit this to the repository. So now I have to add a commit message. Maybe also just to show you the feature of the commit history, I can actually commit this in 2 steps. I think this will be nice to see later on. So for now, I only select to commit the product system. I commit the product system, and then in a second step, I make a second commit where I just commit the process that I've changed. So now this is the only change that is left that is not in line with the repository yet. Now I committed both, and we will switch back to Sebastian's computer.
Let's see. Yeah. So first I will reload this product system, and now you can see there's 2 new tabs. One is the inventory, where you can see that. So when Jonas calculated the product system, there was a small checkbox that is standard. It's always checked unless you uncheck it, of course, which saves the inventory in the product system. So when you commit the data afterwards, it will be uploaded as well. So now I have the inventory saved at the product system, on the product system, and you can see this here on the collaboration server website. So if this is, there's a second view where you can see this in a different, so this is grouped differently by the type of products, by the type of flows, sorry. So you have the elementary flows here, resources, and so on. This is grouped by the last 2 categories of the elementary flows in this case. Okay. In this case, we don't have any impact methods in this database, but you could select an impact method here. So basically every impact method that you have already committed to this repository, and the calculation of the impacts will be done on the fly in the server. So you don't need to select an impact method before in the openLCA calculation. Okay. Okay, so now there's one feature that is maybe very interesting as well. So we are assuming you change the code generation process, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So let's assume in the meanwhile, I don't know that John has already changes, and I'm already thinking about making some to the code generation process. So for example, I will go and at the location of this process as Africa, and go to the inputs and outputs and say, the Kutal production is actually not 3, but it's 3.2. And considering that there's more input, I'll also put some more output. Here, for example, the carbon dioxide. Save this. And now I want to commit this to the repository as usually to make it available for the other contributors. But we'll say that I'm rejected because I'm not up to date. So this is one feature of the repository of the collaboration server, is that you always have to synchronize and kind of get into a linear process of these commits. So if I want to make changes to the repository now, I will first have to fetch changes that were made before, merge them into my local database, and then I can again commit to the database. This is to ensure the linear workflow. So before I will have to go and fetch the data. So let's see, John has the 2 changes here. And now I cannot continue here because there's a conflict of changes, because John did change the same data set that I changed. So I will have to manually merge these changes because the software, of course, cannot know which one is the right change. So for that, you can double click on it, and you have this small comparison window or diff tool, and I see the highlight, the changes highlighted. So when I click on Mark as merged, the model on the left will be taken as your local data set. So, but now I can manually select each change. So I can say, okay, the description, I don't have any description. This makes more sense than not having a description. I take this change. So I update my local model. The location I keep because I just put this here. The process documentation, start and end date, also I will take from Jonas' changes. Then I have the conflicting change of the inputs. Okay, so I see I put 3.2, Jonas put 3.1. I still think the 3.2 is more correct, so I keep this. And the same applies for the change in the output. I keep the 2.2 as I changed it. So now I kind of merged these 2 changes together. Market is merged, and now I can fetch the changes. Okay. So now it still shows that there's some change in this process. This is because the data set in my local database is now still different from the one on the repository, because I only took some of the changes and some additional changes like adding the location. So now I will have to make another commit. Okay, so let's see. Now if I go back to the data set, which I can find here in the processes, the location, code generation, or I could also go and use the search feature. Yes, so now I see there's several ones because I have access to different repositories. I could filter to only see the relevant right now. So this would be this one. So I see there's 3 different versions because there's 3 different commits. The search will show you also older versions of the dataset. in comparison to the dataset browsing feature, it will only show you the latest version of the dataset. So now I can go from here to the dataset, and it has the 3.2 change, the location, and so on. Or the other description is still changed. And what I can do now, I can compare this to a previous state of this same dataset. So the previous version would be the one that Jonas uploaded or committed. So I see there's one additional 2 changes. So there was the amount is different than the amount is right now. So if I hover over it, I can see the old version and the new, or the old value and the new value. Same goes for the carbon dioxide output. And you can see here with the plus sign indicated that this is a new location. This was not set in the previous version of Jonas. I can also go and compare it to another version of this data set. So I can see all the different versions. And I select the initial one, for example, so I can see all the differences that were made during this process now. And I see, okay, the description has been added. Again, the values here have changed, and the validity dates were set. Yeah. Also, I can download the dataset in JSON-LB format, in the LCA format. This will not download only the dataset, but our reference datasets as well, so all the flows, locations, and so on. I can demonstrate. So I have a zip file at the end. And if I open this, you can see that all the unit groups that are relevant for this dataset are here. And this zip file, either in LCD or in JSON-LB, you can directly import it into software that supports this. This would be openLCA, but all other software that supports, for example, the LCD format could import this data then as well without any connection to the collaboration server. And last but not least, we will show the task feature. This was developed to support some sort of review workflow for now. So what we want to do is I created new task. So here I have my overview of tasks that I'm currently having something to do in, which is none. Then there's one in progress, so somebody else has something to do with it, but I'm waiting for the input. So this one is unrelated to our demo here. And then I have completed and cancelled tasks. So I'm going to create a new review task. Let's say a review of code generation process. And I just have to select the repository in which the review will take place. I could take a comment, and so I create this. And now it's still in my to-do list because I have to assign somebody to work on this task. So I click on it again. I select the datasets that should be reviewed. So in this case, I'll select the code generation, and just for demonstration purposes, I will also select some sources. Let's say 5 sources. Okay, and these are now shown here. And in the bottom, I have the task assignment area where I now add Jonas. He's the only one I can add because only reviewers, so members that have the role of a reviewer and have access, of course, then to the repository can be assigned tasks within the repository. So I select Jonas. And now, he has an open assignment, an active assignment. And if I go back, you can see here, now I don't have any active tasks anymore, it says 0. Because the current task I created is now in progress by Jonas. And so we switch again to Jonas' computer.
Right, so this is now again the online interface of the collaboration server. Let me just quickly reload. So this is the group and the repository on which we worked so far. I can now see, or this symbol now with the one indicates that I have one task which I have to review. So I click on this, on the task symbol basically, and there's the task that Sebastian assigned to me. So I open this task, and I can here see the data sets which I have to review. So I can open them, for instance, and I can see basically the data in the data sets or the changes that Sebastian contributed. And I can select, for instance, specific data sets which I review, and I can accept them.
Which you already reviewed in this case. So this is what I go check. Yeah, check mark so you can.
Right. So this now indicates that I reviewed the data sets. And once I've done that, I can complete my assignment.
And yeah, and now it's in progress again because it's not yet finished. Just Jonas has finished his assignment. I could have assigned, for example, another reviewer, 2 or 3 different ones, and so the task is completed once the creator of the task says it's finished, and not when each assignee completed his assignment. What you also can do during, or can you switch to me? What you also can do is during the review, or I'll refresh. Yeah, so now again in the to-do list of my user, because now I have to kind of review the review and say, okay, this was done correctly. I go to the code generation. There's one feature that I'd like to introduce here, one of the last ones. And you might have recognized the pencil sign here on the top. If you click on it, you go into the review mode, and now you see there's little speech bubbles next to mostly all fields that you can comment on. And I can make a comment, for example, on this exchange. This can be done outside or as part of the review process. This is not really connected, but we thought of it as one feature of the review process. So I could make a comment and say, I saw that you put a different value first, but I think my information is more correct. Not very polite, but just a demonstration. And then I could just add the comment, but I'm sure that I don't want to change this anymore, so I can release it. Once it's released, it will not be changed. Now I have this comment here. Other users could reply to it, and so on. So this is like a normal comment feature that you maybe more from other applications. It's now indicating here with a green color that this actually has already a comment, and if I go out of the review mode, I will only see the speech bubbles where there is already a comment. In this case, I can see, I will put this here. And if I go back to openLCA now and reload the process again, there is a small comments tab on the process as well, and I can see it within openLCA. I can navigate to the inputs, outputs, and also see a speech bubble here. Click on it and see the comments that were made. So this way, we thought that usually somebody will review the datasets on the collaboration server, and somebody will have to know about these comments to make changes in openLCA accordingly. So that's why we also put the comments here into openLCA. You cannot change them here, but it's just as information for the editor of the dataset. And I think that concludes it. Let's see. Well, yeah, the search I already showed, and there's maybe one interesting feature that the last one I'll show, which is if you go to the repository, you can make it accessible publicly. And now if I log out and go to the start page, so if you're not logged in, you will always land on the search results start page. And here I can see the demonstration webinar as part of it, and then navigate to it. I could also navigate via URL to it. And now I'm not logged in anymore, so since it's a public repository, I can download the data sets here. I can navigate through the data as I showed before, but I cannot see the commit information. I cannot see the information in the users. So it's really just about the data sets to make them publicly available if you have that need. Okay, so that concludes our demonstration.
Mm-hmm. We have about 10 minutes left and also a few slides left. I will try going through them very quickly so that we also have some time for discussion later on. One question was already posted in the chat, so if you have more questions, you can also ask them there, or you can just ask them after the presentation via your microphone. So we thought about, of course, about use cases for the LCA collaboration server, and the first use case we came up with is basically iterative co-development through the LCA collaboration server. So an example for this would be that if a manufacturer contracts a consulting office to conduct an LCA study, the roles usually would be that the consultant has all the knowledge on LCAs, whereas the manufacturer has all the knowledge on what resources are being used, or for instance, how much energy or other input flows are being used in the production process. So the LCA collaboration server could then be used, for instance, to exchange this data. So the manufacturer could commit the production-related data to the LCA collaboration server, which could then be fetched by the consultant who builds the product system. And the consultant can also commit the product system for a review to the manufacturer. So this would be much easier to use under use of the LCA collaboration server compared to exporting entire databases to, let's file sharing services, and it would also help to track the changes and to have different versions of the repository on which the manufacturer and the consultant can then work together. Also, the product system that is then being reviewed by the manufacturer and possibly also commented could again be sent back to the consultant by the collaboration server, who then incorporates the feedback. And with this combination of commits and fetches by the different parties, you have this iterative co-development of an LCA study. Another case, for instance, would be if, for instance, one person or a working group would like to share LCA data with, let's say, a large group of people, or even maybe the public. A user could commit data to the collaboration server, and then there could be either public access to a repository, or maybe users could get a reader account to this repository, so they could connect to the repository and get the data and then disconnect from the repository, for instance, and just continue working on their own database. And this would also help to basically to track the changes and also to make the sharing just very simple. The third use case would be to set up a verified database. So it's basically a combination of the cases that we presented before. So different users could connect to a repository. For instance, this could be internal for instance, for a research project. So all users who work in this research project can commit their LCA data to a repository. This repository could then be fetched by a reviewer or also a moderator. And the moderator could then verify all the changes in the repository. And once they have been approved, the repository could be released to the public so that other LCA practitioners can use this verified database to go on with their own work. But if we hope that we were able to raise your interest for the LCA collaboration server. So if you're interested, you can download the LCA collaboration server for free from the openLCA website. And we also wrote a manual which should help you get started. So it explains all the basic terms. There are also explanations of the workflow, and also there are some instructions how you can set up the LCA collaboration server yourself. On top of this, we also have our public support platform, ask.openlca.org. It's a question and answer website basically for life cycle assessment. We always try to answer all questions as good as possible. If you really need guaranteed and prioritized support, you may also want to get one of our service contracts. But yeah, as I said, we do our best to answer all questions that are being posed on this website. Maybe some concluding remarks from my side would be that if you install the collaboration server on your own server, you also don't need to worry about any privacy because you have full control over your data. So even if you work with confidential data from one of your customers, this should not be a problem at all. In the long term, we also would like to build sort of a community of best practices. So we would like to use the LCA collaboration server maybe also to distribute open source LCA studies. So if you have any studies which you would like to contribute to this repository, we would also be happy to receive your input. And maybe one question was already posed via the chat, which was whether we can provide public test access for the collaboration server. I think we are not able to provide test access which is available to the public, so to everyone, because also of copyrights, because we cannot or we don't have the time to control who's uploading what type of data and if maybe users violate copyrights. But what we can do is upon request to possibly to provide you with temporary test access to the collaboration server so that you can try it out whether it, yes, or how it can support the work of your team. So we already provided some use cases which we came up with, but we would also be curious to hear from you how you think or what you think how the collaboration server can support the work of your team or in general, if you have any questions. I think we now have some 5 to 10 minutes left to answer these, and I think Gerhard already, there are already a couple of questions in the chat, so we will just start answering them now, and then afterwards either you add other questions to the chat or you can just ask them via your microphone. But let's first start with the questions in the chat.
I'll take over because there were some technical questions already, I think. So let's see, first I'll log back into my account. Second. Can you open the scope because I cannot see them anymore? Here, chat. Okay, okay. So the first question was from Caroline. Yeah, you're right. It's similar to the workflow is definitely inspired by the Git workflow, but of course it is a bit simplified. So, for example, you don't have the local thing in Git. You have the local workspace, the local repository, and then the remote repository. And with the collaboration server, we're skipping the part of the local repository and directly commit and push the data in one step to the repository online, to the remote. There is, I'm not sure if I get the question right. I didn't show this before, but if I go back now, you can see here the commit history. I don't know, I'm not sure what you mean with suppressing modification from specific commits. So
I meant if you can undo what you just done.
So there's the possibility, there's some built-in features that we didn't show. For example, I can now right-click on a specific process and show it in the history. So there's the whole history tab here now, where I can see the different commits. I can select the previous version. And I think here I can see the difference. Well, this is the wrong one. Yeah, I can see differences here, but I can right-click and check this out. But what it does, it will delete your local changes and just go back to the initial check-in state or the commit that you selected. But you will not be able to cherry pick. Another way would be to compare this data set with a specific commit. For example, with the initial check-in. Okay, so I only see this one change now because I only selected the process here, and I can say override local changes. So what I can do now is, oh, all these changes were not good, so I override this with the initial check-in state. And now the process is again in the state of that it was in the beginning, and I can commit this back to the repository, still having this then in the history. So does that answer your question?
Yes, thanks.
Okay, you're welcome. Then the Git branches. We would like to have this feature implemented, but it's quite some work to do, and right now I don't think we have it on the agenda for at least for this year. But it would be very interesting to have branches, of course, in the collaboration. And then the question about the parameters and uncertainty. Yeah, this is because I didn't put any information about uncertainty. The online view of the data set supports, well, I'm not should support all of the fields, but at least most of them. So the uncertainty is definitely in there. But I didn't specify any uncertainty information or parameters before. So let's do this here. So now I have to reopen. Now I'm back in the initial state of the dataset because I overrid it with the one from the initial check-in, and I will add a parameter to and some uncertainty information. Distribution. Okay, save this. Okay. So now if I go back, I'm seeing the new commit. Process. And it now has the uncertainty information shown here, as well as the new tab parameters, where the parameters are shown. We try to hide the information that's not available because otherwise it's just empty, ugly tabs. So this is why there was no parameters before, and now there is. The same goes for the allocation tab that was now created, and you can see here also the different versions again, and take a look at them without comparing. I didn't show that before. Okay. Any other questions? Mm-hmm.
I will have a little question. First of all, congratulations for your work. And what's the amount of time and what are the skills needed to install a self-hosted collaboration server?
Thank you first. And if you're familiar with setting up Java applications on for example, on a Tomcat, we recommend using a Tomcat server. I'd say it should be done within an hour or less. What you basically just need to do is, we are using Ubuntu or Debian Linux systems, but it works on Windows systems as well. So the UCA that's funding most of the project is using a Windows server. I don't know which version. But let's say for the Ubuntu server, you have to install Tomcat and Elasticsearch separately, and then we have a so-called collaboration server installer Java application. It's a command line Java application that will set up the necessary directories, initialize the Elasticsearch index for the search and browsing, and will also create an initial database with an admin user. You have to specify some information. This is described as well in the manual. And then once this is done, you deploy the collaboration server WAR file on the Tomcat, and yeah, then you're good to go. Then you will need to do some really minor configuration in the collaboration server. I can show the admin view. So as an admin, you see some version information on the bottom. So in case you have any errors or so, then we can identify which version you're running. So this is specifying the last commit of the collaboration server. And then there is the admin area here, where you can also manage creation of users and teams and so on. And then you have the settings here. So this is filled out. Most of it is filled out during the installation, but some of the information you need to add, for example, the name, and then you can also disable features. So if you don't want that anybody is able to make repositories public on their own, you can disable this feature, and then this is not possible anymore. You have the mail configuration for notifications. So when I'm creating a new repository or I'm making changes, you can have notifications here. So that will send an email to me when a repository was moved, data was committed, so on. And then for this, of course, you have to specify the mail settings. We have a messaging feature, which is similar to for example, the web interfaces of WhatsApp or Telegram, or these kind of things. And this can also be configured here. But yeah, that's it.
Thank you.
Right, so it's already 4:05, but I think maybe we can answer one more question or also receive your feedback on what do you think for what you could use the collaboration server in your working group. So both is welcome, feedback or question. Otherwise, if there's no question, we can also finish the webinar. And of course, we are also always available for you via email. So if you have maybe some feedback which you would rather issue via email, or also if you have a question, or if you think about getting the LCA collaboration server, so something which we not mentioned yet is that we will most likely also offer hosting of the LCA collaboration server. So then you don't have to install it yourself for a monthly fee, of course. So if you're interested in either that or also test access, or if you have more questions, just get in touch with us via email, or you can also, if you already downloaded the collaboration server and you're already working with it, you can also get support via our support platform asks.openLCA.org. So yes, right. Thank you all for participating in this webinar, and well, we look forward to hearing from you, hopefully.
Thank you.
Have a good day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.